Ritik, so nice to have you here. First
Thank you.
podcast in English, so we'll see how it goes. For people who don't know you, can you give us a short presentation of yourself?
Sure, yeah. And first of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I know I've been following you for a while, and whoever's listening for the first time, please go follow his newsletter. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
A little bit about myself, my elevator pitch. So, born in Delhi, grew up in Singapore, currently living in Mexico City for the past 9 years, and been in sort of like the financial world, as well as really kind of grew within the fintech community in Mexico, and have work experience in both Singapore and in Mexico. And on the weekends, I would say, I like to do stand-up comedy. Also have a podcast which has been in zombie mode for the past 3 years.
Maybe with this one, you're gonna have
Hopefully, yeah, I'll get sparked. I'll get motivated today, and love to take care of my pet dog Oreo.
Nice.
Yeah, that's like a quick summary right there. I'm gonna talk a lot more about my experience in a bit too, for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's the idea of this podcast. So usually it's in Spanish, so maybe we're gonna have new viewers who doesn't know the format. So it's a long short format, and we have 3 parts. Your initial stories, where you grew up, your family, what you study. Second part is your first experience, like professional experience, because not everyone wake up a founder. And third part is your entrepreneurial journey.
Sure.
So here we go.
I love it. I love it. Oh, by the way, for anyone watching, this is all tequila.
Yeah. We start with tequila. So, as you said, born in Delhi.
Yeah.
And grew up in Singapore.
Yeah.
Why
How was that like, right?
Yeah, how was that like?
It's actually kind of interesting. Where I grew up in Delhi was like very middle class. It's in this part of Delhi called Janakpuri, which at that point of time was the largest sort of community of like, or almost like a what do you call that in Spanish? A delegación in Spanish. There was the largest one in Asia in the 80s, right? And my house specifically was super close to the largest jail in Asia.
Nice.
In case they needed hostages.
Fun fact.
Fun fact. Yeah. My kindergarten, funny enough, was actually even closer to the jail than my house.
Wow.
But as you're growing up, that's not something that you focus on, it's just there. And it was actually when people wanted directions to the house, they're like, yeah, make a left from the jail.
Yeah,
don't hear that often. It was a very, sort of standard upbringing. Indian families are very close. So my grandparents lived on the ground floor, my parents on the first floor, and my dad's older brother on the second floor. Okay. And my mom's family was like 1 block away. So it was a very sort of tight-knit upbringing, very close to my mom's side, my dad's side. Now nobody lives there except like my grandfather and a couple of my cousins.
Okay.
But pretty much everybody else has sort of moved somewhere else. And I think when I was around 7, my dad's, so he got this offer from Singapore when I was 7. And at that point in time, as a 7-year-old, you're like, where are we going? What is this? What's happening? And then next thing you know, you're in a different country.
It's a big change.
Big change. I couldn't even process it. Right? I have an older sister who is like 3 years older, and she was still kind of getting to the grips of it and whatnot. But it was a huge change for my mom, especially because she spent her whole life in India. Yes, she sailed with my dad, but that was like 6 months on, 6 months off.
Yeah.
Never really living in a different country altogether. Fortunately, it's still like 5 hours by plane. It's still in Asia. There's still some Indians, at least when we came to...
A strong community of Indians, no?
Correct. Yeah. So it wasn't that like foreign. And then growing up in Singapore was different.
Which year was that? It was like
1996, 1997, around that. That's when I came. At that time, Singapore is not what it is now.
Yeah, because
there's
they
no
have changed
crazy
so
rich
fast.
Asians. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Changed a lot. It was still, very, very well organized, very efficient, but it still had like that sort of up and coming kind of feeling to it.
Okay.
Once in a while, things didn't work. Now it's like everything works all the time.
That's crazy.
But yeah, it was very different growing up in Singapore because I wouldn't say it was better or worse. Each sort of childhood had its own thing. Like in India, you were encouraged to go out and play.
Yeah.
You know that from 5 p.m. you better not be at home. You be out there playing with your friends.
Okay.
You know, if you get hurt, good, we'll figure it out. In Singapore, it was a lot more like you better be studying because some exam was around the corner all the time. You know, or if you got injured, oh, I'm gonna complain to this person, that person, and whatever. So it was very different in that sense. But the competitiveness of the Singaporean society, they always say that Singapore is one of the best education systems in the world.
Yeah.
It's a fact. As soon as I got there, immediately failed all my exams.
You're like, okay, that's real.
So I was like, okay, now I really got to be serious, And I was 7.
Yeah.
I was used to like, what do I color?
Exactly, yeah.
And then it got to that like, okay, you got to apply math. In India, it's a lot more about like, can you memorize stuff and then just almost like regurgitate it,
Yeah, same in France.
Sure. Right? And in Singapore, it was like, okay, now you've learned the rules of addition, apply them in a number sequence.
Okay.
So it wasn't like, okay, you know what is 5 plus 5, you know that's going to be 10. Now let me give you 5 blank, 15 blank. So you had to understand that, okay, so that's 10 and 20. So it could not, massive lack of understanding of that. And at least when I joined the education system from the age of 10, you go through an exam at the end of the year that determines which way you'll be streamed on the basis of one grade.
When you're 10?
From the age of 10.
From the age of 10.
So at 10, if you do well, then they'll put the smart people in one class and the not so smart people in the other class.
Okay.
Right? And before that exam, there was that grade 4. They had A, B, C, D, E, F. I was in I.
It wasn't looking good.
It was not looking good. But I would say like just because of my teachers, they really sort of understood my learning. They really took care of me. So I did very well in that one exam and then moved all the way to like B. Nice. Instead of A or B or I, So, and then at 12, you do an exam which is national level. And because of one grade, you switch schools.
Okay.
So you could be the only one from your like primary school or whatever that ends up in some other school and you got to restart all over again.
That's strong, yeah?
Pretty intense.
Yeah.
Then again at 14, but you're still within your secondary school. 16, another national level exam. You got to change schools again after that.
It must be so stressful.
Oh, exactly.
So stressful.
And then at 18, that's the final one before you enter college.
Okay.
So, I mean, for guys who had girlfriends at that point in time, I was like, how are you doing this? Because you would have no time. There was school. There was, your extracurricular activities. Say you play a sport or you join a club, whatever. And then you're like crawling back into bed,
Yeah.
You only have energy to eat, finish your homework, and that's it. So, it wasn't the easiest, but I would say like, for example, a lot of countries, they say that just work hard, just do well in school, you'll do great in life. A lot of times it's not true because some other rich kid can just equally work hard with the help of the best tutors, whatever.
Yeah.
And in some cases, it's true as well. But if you genuinely apply yourself in an education system like Singapore, you can change your whole family or your whole life in one lifetime.
Okay.
So if you do really well in school, like especially towards like the exams at 16 and 18, and we follow the British system, if you do really well, you get a scholarship to the best universities in the school, in the world, whatever, or even locally, and that just leads you on a path to financially, in terms of the network that you have,
Yeah.
immensely. So that's something I have to give credit where credit's due, despite it being a very stressful kind of education system.
At least it's fair.
Exactly.
It's fair.
It's a national level exam.
Yeah.
Nobody can do it for you,
Yeah.
right? And if you prepared, you could pay as much money to a tutor. He's not going to be able to have the questions to the
Exactly.
exam.
Because there is other places where you can literally buy your
Right.
your diploma. There
Right.
you cannot.
Impossible.
Impossible.
So yeah, I mean, and then after college, after junior college, you have to go through the 2 years in the army.
Oh, you have to go to the army.
That too. Yeah.
But so you're Singaporean?
Yeah. So
Okay.
before I went to the army, I was still with my Indian passport,
Okay.
and my dad forgot to read the fine print when he became a permanent resident in Singapore, that his son had to go through the army.
Okay.
And I was like, what is this? Why am I getting this letter?
Even if you're a permanent resident.
Correct.
Wow.
And if you have a son,
Okay.
you're gonna have to go.
Okay. The good news is that Singaporeans usually don't go to war.
Thank
they
God.
They're not
Oh
in too
my
many
God,
involved
yeah.
in too many
I
wars.
wasn't like going for missions or anything.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, all my friends were Singaporean.
Makes sense for you to go
Exactly.
follow the
Correct.
go with the flow.
Exactly. And the thing is that, like, okay, a lot of my like India friends, not Indian Singaporeans, but the Indians who still had the Indian passport, they were like, you know what, I'm gonna go to university in the US, Europe, Canada, wherever. And they left. And up until recently, because you had essentially deserted the army, you couldn't come back. Even if you were
Okay.
transiting through Singapore,
You cannot.
can't do it.
Wow, that's
Very intense.
intense. Yeah.
But now you can come back with like a tourist visa, but you can't really work there, can't like
I mean,
come back
yeah.
in that sense.
You miss something because Singaporeans so huge, so strong, it's growing,
Yeah.
so many opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you go to the army. You're like what? 18?
18, yeah.
18. And how is the experience?
Interesting. Actually, the first 3 months you're on a separate island,
Okay.
like 30 minutes by boat from Singapore. And when I was there, this was like what, 2007, 2008, when the whole world was collapsing.
Yeah.
I was in the army. I was like, hey, what's going on?
I think it's a
Shaving my
good time
head.
to go to
It's
the
the
army.
best time, exactly.
If you were to look for a job at that time or something.
Exactly. Exactly. It was the best time
Yeah.
to not be working.
Especially in finance. Because
Especially in finance, exactly.
Yeah.
So it was a blessing, and at that point in time, I had no idea about what a stock was, what finance was, whatsoever.
But what do you wanted to do when you were a kid?
I wanted to be a pilot.
Okay.
I wanted to be a pilot, and one of my very close cousins, my dad's older brother's son,
Okay.
he's been a pilot like I think 20 plus years now.
Okay.
So my only aim to get a degree was so that, because it's a requirement for flight school.
Okay.
That was the only reason why I wanted to get a degree. Thankfully, I did very well in school, so I had all the options, be it in the UK, since we follow the British system,
Yeah.
or in Singapore. And my parents managed to kind of work their magic and were like, no, don't go overseas. It's fine. We'll send you for an exchange. they didn't.
Yeah.
But essentially got into, there's like three main universities. So one was to do rocket science, the other was to do like aeronautical engineering, and the other one was business. So I accepted the one at rocket science,
Yeah.
and while I was in the army, I changed to go study business.
Okay. Why is that?
Why did I do that? Because it was the easier option.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to be a pilot, and they just need a degree. Why would
okay.
I want to kill myself studying complicated physics and maths and whatnot
Yeah.
when I'm going to have to do that in flight school? Might as well just take the easiest path. And at the time, I had no idea what business degree even meant. My sister went to the same school,
Yeah.
but she didn't really go like, okay, this is what I'm doing these days, etc., etc. And then the experience within the army, how do I say? You can essentially have like two paths, right? After the first 3 months, and there's no like mobile, no smartphones, whatever. So the first 2 weeks you were by yourself.
Okay.
In the island, so no contact with the outside world, whatever. And people really start becoming different in just those 3 months. You know, you start making your bed.
Yeah.
You know, you start waking up early. You feel a lot fitter. There's a bit of additional discipline in the way you walk, you dress, right? And I could have gone like, oh, my knee and all that. Maybe I should have done that. And, you know, get like a nice desk job. You
Okay.
can go home to sleep. And you essentially work from like 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. or something.
Kind of a regular job.
Yeah.
Like in the army.
Yeah, like just data entry, whatever.
Yeah.
And what a lot of these people did was go to night school at the end. So they'll come out 5 p.m., 3 hours of night school, and then rinse and repeat, which was actually pretty smart if you think about it. But I told myself, like, look, if this is the one time that I'm going to be in this experience, just have the full volume. So I became an officer instead. And the idea was that, you know, you go through 9 months of just hell.
Okay.
Essentially, like just some guy on your face screaming at you. Nothing is perfect. You're never getting enough food. You're never getting enough sleep.
Like in the movies.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a bit more safe because it's the Singapore Army.
Yeah.
But as like the officer school, they really expect you to live to the officer level because you're supposed to lead others.
Yeah.
And if you're not at this level, you can't be expected to lead other people. So, you know, going through all of that kind of rigorous training, firing every gun you can think of, going for different missions. You know, some of them were like survival, like just 1 day worth of food. They give you a compass, a map in a different country. You're like, see you later.
Yeah, and there is some intense nature over there.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
jungle and stuff like that.
Correct.
It's
like
tropical.
Correct. So that movie Platoon
Yeah.
is actually very realistic, where there's just mosquitoes all the time. Even sleeping becomes hard because there's just so much sound
Yeah.
around you all the time. And when it rains, it's not like, oh, that romantic Bollywood rain. Not even close. You're like getting hurt in your neck. You just get drenched.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it starts becoming sunny and it becomes so hot that your uniform dries up in like 20 minutes.
Wow.
So after that survival mission, it was like 9 days and I lost like 8 kilos in those 9 days.
That's a lot.
You know, I came back like my ribs showing and everything.
Yeah.
It was intense. And then after that, once you graduate, you're given 50 people to manage.
Okay.
So it's like, you know, that sort of real trial by fire. Because I was 19. Nobody is like reading leadership books.
No.
You know, nobody's like, I wish I could be, you know, people are just kind of thrust into that and are like, make it happen. You get like people helping you, and that's why there's a hierarchy and whatnot.
Yeah.
But most of the time it's just you and like your other friends in the same situation, you're just like, dude, what do I do now?
Learning by doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And people will challenge your authority constantly.
Yeah, and you're a kid. You're 19.
Exactly. Other people who are younger than you, older than you, will be like, "Why is this idiot can't even grow a beard? You know, why is he in charge of me?
Yeah.
You know." So managing different egos, and thankfully we didn't go to war or anything,
Yeah.
but we still had to take part in exercises where there were live bullets, right?
Okay.
So when the bullets firing, nobody is like, yeah, what's the procedure, let's follow. Everything is all over, so you got to have your mental capacity
Yeah.
to just kind of be like, bro, you need to move and do this. Suddenly people just kind of are like following, but you need somebody to be like, okay, let's move on this, on that. So that really gave me a massive insight, which led me to change my major from studying rocket science to business.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I felt like, okay, it wasn't just doing whatever your parents want you to do, which is so prevalent in Asian culture. You know, nothing wrong with it, but I felt like I had like the independence and the confidence to be like, okay, let me see if I can make this happen. And obviously, my parents were extremely unhappy about it. You're like, you idiot!
Rocket science is better.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And then get to college. That was a very different experience. Also, was not used to, how do I say, meeting so many different types of people.
Yeah.
Like as you can imagine, every 20, 21-year-old had done my Europe backpacking trip, whatnot, which was super fun, and had a lot of different experiences and whatnot. But it was, college was almost like where I told myself, this is the last time I get to really make a mistake. Try everything.
Okay.
In that sense, where if I want to study marketing, let me see what it is like. If I wanted to do something else, if I wanted to intern at a place, and the only lesson I took away from that internship is I never want to work there again.
Yeah.
That's a good experience, because once I graduate, it's almost like, on your permanent file.
Yeah.
Why did you leave the job? Why do you have this gap? What happened here? Who did you work with? All these sort of questions come out when you're in the real world. But when you're in college, it's almost like, yeah, great, you have an internship, you have experience, let's move on.
Yeah, you have permission to try.
Correct.
Yeah.
So instead of following like the traditional path, I worked on my strengths, which was like math, and essentially studied quantitative finance.
Okay.
Which nobody wanted to do because everybody wanted like a high GPA, a high grade.
Yeah.
I graduated with a 3.0 out of 4, which is like barely,
Okay, it's not
barely merit. Like just like one of my professors changed at the last minute because I was about at like 2.99.
Yeah.
And he changed that B to a B plus,
Okay.
and I got to 3.
Nice.
Like it wasn't. By that time, I knew I was going to get a job, etc. Anyway, but I was like, this will just help me pass a bit better with the HR and whatnot. So stumbled into trading.
Yeah.
Because of my grades, I was like not able to secure any internship. And I was like, what do I do? I still want to be a pilot, but I feel like nobody really does internships on that. Should I try and find something, etc.? So somehow found the job portal. Actually, I had applied to so many internships that the school specifically emailed me and a few other people to stop applying.
Really?
Because we were screwing up the statistics.
Ah, yeah. That's right. That's statistics.
They're like, please stop. And I was like, I'm paying tuition fees.
Yeah.
You can't stop me. I'll apply to as many as I want. I'm paying tuition.
Yeah.
It's your problem that I can't get the internship. You didn't prepare me. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So essentially, I managed to get to the job portal of the other university's business school.
Okay.
And I was like, this seems interesting. I've never really I'm kind of getting into the whole business world, finance. I'm hearing these things about what an investment banking trader does or what an investment banker does. So really prepared like crazy, and then did well on the interviews and started, and that blew my mind.
Yeah.
Working on the trading floor is, as much as I don't want to kind of say that that movie is a Bible or anything, because it's not. But that one sentence that Leo DiCaprio says in Wolf on Wall Street, if you want to smell what money smells like, work on the trading floor of a bank. It really is, because it's just so much sound, this, that, every single bad word you can think of. It always smells like coffee. Every person is genuinely like, that hunger.
Okay.
Whether you're 21 or 51, that sort of, it never goes away. So that, like, I was super, super excited to be part of that and figure out what it meant and learn from people who were very experienced. And then that kind of really sort of structured my path as to what I wanted to do. And I even took a semester off just so that I could work longer on the trading floor.
Okay.
And then one thing led to the other, and after graduating, I was doing high frequency trading for UBS Investment Bank, which was the worst. Like, you're no longer in charge of doing anything on, like, you don't have a view.
It's pure algorithm
Correct.
because it's too fast.
It's too fast. We were
Yeah.
doing like what, 1,000 trades a second, or maybe even more.
Yeah, that's
right?
crazy.
So
I heard it's super hard to get into that job, that position.
it's maybe, I mean, at that point in time, this was what, 2015.
Yeah.
This was also kind of new.
Okay.
It helped that I had trading background and I had studied quantitative finance.
Okay.
So there were only 9 of us in the whole of UBS Bank,
Yeah.
which has like 10,000 plus people. Only 9 of us were doing what we were doing. 3 in Asia, 3 in London, 3 in the US.
This was still super early.
So if somebody went on vacation, you suddenly had a bunch of extra work to do.
Yeah.
Right? And we had a team of like 10 PhDs from like Cambridge, Harvard, Yale, all these guys who were writing all the code. And our job was to maintain and essentially, how do I say, almost like being in like a F1 car. Of course the driver works with the mechanics, the technical team to kind of be like, maybe we should think about it. But at the end of the day, it's the driver who is driving.
Yeah.
The engineers and whatnot, they can postulate and theorize what it should look like, but we would be the ones taking the algorithm for a test drive and see how it goes. And if it screws up, it's me. It's on me.
Yeah, you're losing the money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So making sure that I can react quickly, manage those things. The kind of trading I really enjoyed was a lot more mathematics, like derivatives driven, where it's almost like a chess game, where I put a trade or I get into a particular deal and then it takes like 6 months to pay off because of the sort of take I had on the market.
Okay.
So this was like every millisecond things are changing. So I felt kind of fish out of water. At that point in time, I was also doing long distance. That didn't help either. So working from 5 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday to Friday, and no lunch break because the markets are moving.
Yeah.
So we had to get an intern to get lunch, and one toilet break because the markets are moving.
Wow.
Yeah, I felt like one of those Chinese kids in the Apple sweatshop or something,
Yeah.
It was so intense. Of course, the learning opportunity, the people, the compensation, all of that was fantastic. But at that point in time, I was like very anxious. I didn't know what to do. And I was also doing long distance on top, so I would come home and have to deal with the long distance stuff.
Long distance, you mean
I
running?
was dating a lady from Mexico at that point of time.
Oh, okay. So
We
that's
met
what
each
you mean
other
by long
in
distance.
Singapore, which was also very tough, right? So this is why I don't have hair anymore.
How did you met a Mexican girl in? She was
Uh,
tourist or she was studying there?
Yeah, so she was doing her exchange
Okay.
in Singapore, and back in college I was a DJ. Terrible,
Okay.
wildly unpopular. Nobody wanted to like stick to comedy.
So you're a DJ.
Yeah,
Breaking
not
news.
good, not good at all. And essentially, I essentially just used that opportunity to organize parties for exchange students.
Okay.
And that's where I met her at like a beach party that we threw. And then things started moving, and I took a vacation to Mexico City and fell in love with the place, the people.
When was that? Which year?
2015,
Okay.
June 2015, went back to Singapore, almost immediately quit my job. And
How long have you been in your job?
I think I was there about like 8 months, maybe a year, close to a year max.
But yeah, long distance, like, I mean, it's 12 hours, like the time zones.
Yeah.
It's something like that, like 12,
Yeah,
13
yeah.
hours, just crazy.
Yeah. So that whole kind of, not being too happy, even though it was like, once in a life opportunity. And of course, I really enjoyed it and very grateful for the opportunity to beat like 120 other people for that one position. It was nuts. The interview process was crazy as well. They made me do stand up in a boardroom.
Yeah.
The worst possible situation for a comedian, where like there's two other people at the end of the boardroom and they're like, tell us a joke. And there's like echo when you're talking.
Wow.
So awkward. Oh my God. What were they thinking? And then essentially I was like, okay, I'm gonna make this. I'm gonna trust myself to be able to explore this opportunity to come to Mexico and see what's out here.
What's the plan when you're coming to Mexico?
Barely any.
Okay, barely any.
Barely
No.
any. The plan was, okay, I was not so familiar with Mexican culture, besides, my ex-girlfriend and her family and whatnot.
What was your view or your idea about Mexico before coming
Oh,
to
right.
Mexico?
Yeah. Whoever Mexico has hired as a PR agency, fire them immediately. Terrible perception.
Okay.
Right? Most people think it's a desert where it's just donkeys and people in sombreros and ponchos, right?
Exactly.
And they think it's all like drugs and cartels and so not true, right? And then only when I came here, then I was like, this, you could smell opportunity.
Yeah.
Almost, that sort of, that excitement, a very young population, so many people who are excited to try. Singapore, on the other hand, it's like, it's an amazing country with a lot of opportunity, but it's almost like, when you meet people from London, great city, one of the greatest cities but everybody's unhappy.
Same with Paris.
Right, same with Paris, exactly.
Same with Paris.
Same with Singapore.
Yeah.
You just have that big city unhappiness where it's just like, I'm always in a rush. I'm always unhappy. Something's happening in my life. But the problems are like this. When you come to Mexico City, people have actual problems.
Exactly, yeah.
And you're like, whatever, I'll deal with it as time comes. I had never worked in Latin America or with Latin Americans in my life before. And essentially what I wanted to kind of see was like, I had a bit of confidence that, okay, I'd still have a degree from Singaporean university. I've worked on the trading floor of a couple of investment banks. I thought I could sort of have the confidence to walk into a bank or talk to people, etc. I had no idea the rude awakening I was in for, because a lot of times, you know, especially within banking here, it's a combination of what you have studied, where you have studied, and who you know.
Exactly.
I didn't know anybody here,
Yeah.
right? In that sense, so even going through the interviews, etc., didn't know Spanish.
Speaking Spanish so important.
Still the case.
Still the case.
But
Next interview we do is in Spanish, right?
Done. I will get on Duolingo right now. It was, and back then it was just even stringing basic phrases. I had no idea. So it was a bit of like a, you know, that sort of reality hitting you in the face, and you're like, oh, like what do I do now?
Yeah.
You know, and I had some opportunities, some introductions. What I didn't know is that Mexicans don't know how to say no either.
Yeah.
Ahorita. That's the first time I knew about ahorita.
You're so excited because you're like, yeah, everyone seems interested in, I don't know, my offer or working with me. And a few months later, you're still at the same point.
So like, next week, we'll make it happen next week. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
They just want you to just stop talking instead of them having to say no. So I was like, all right. And thankfully, I had a couple of leads still. And just by coincidence, I was trying to do an interview. And next to me was the CEO of Konfio, who at that time was trying to raise money. Now, both of us had very similar backgrounds, math, working on the trading floor, and we just kind of gelled in that sense. Like we just were like that sort of, you
During
know,
the interview.
During the interview, that he was not interviewing me at all. He was trying to raise funding from these guys.
Okay.
And I was trying to be like, okay, when can I start working? How can I add value, etc., etc.
Oh, okay. So you just met him randomly.
Randomly
Okay.
at a bar in Polanquito.
Okay.
And then we just kind of, he gave me his business information. And I was like, there's no harm. And I could tell, you know, how do I say, one of the things when you're joining a startup, and something I find very important, it's like, when you have a new company, nobody believes in you. Nobody should believe in you too,
Yeah.
right? Because it's new. But the ability for you to convince people, be it the charisma, to leave their existing comfortable jobs, to take a pay cut, to follow you in this crazy dream, he has that.
Okay.
You know, and that's something I've always tried to emulate, especially with my own idea, that if I'm bringing people on, it's not just because I'm promising them like, oh, you'll become rich and this and whatever. It's about genuinely selling them this crazy optimistic story, like we're genuinely going to change this. Look at this insane thing that's out there. So I was very convinced. And even though I got a couple of offers from a few banks, I was like, how do I say, it felt like a job. This felt like a real challenge.
Yeah.
You know, that I could make impact. And that's when so I arrived here like late September 2015.
Okay.
And by December, I started as like a consultant in Konfio. And by like February of 2016, I was full time.
Okay, it was quick.
Exactly. That's really how I started my journey and my career in Mexico, and got into the whole fintech thing.
For people who doesn't know, what is Konfio?
Right. Yeah. So very, very good question. Konfio is a B2B lending platform that essentially helps small, medium enterprises get loans within like 5 minutes, which are not served by banks, which essentially need this additional capital to reach next milestones in their businesses. And it's also the 5th unicorn in Mexico.
Yeah, so when you join, where is Konfio in his journey?
They just closed Series A.
Okay.
Just. Like, I'm talking, the term sheet had just been signed.
Okay, and the team is still
I
small.
was like employee 13.
Yeah. So,
So-
you ride the wave.
Oh man, it was like I remember when my older sister and my brother-in-law, who also works in banking, they came to visit and they were seeing like these two tables that just sit pulled together and a toilet that never worked. You know, like and we're like, "Are you okay? What's going on?" I was like, "Just trust me. This particular company is gonna go places. You're gonna see." And we did. They did. You know.
Did you ask for stock option?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Because it wasn't that common at that time.
No,
Stock
no,
option
no.
wasn't common. I think it became more common in 2021, but before that, usually not many people knew about it.
Correct.
So you.
I didn't even
rightly-
know. I had no idea what stock options meant.
Okay.
I just thought it was like, I understood what equity within the company meant.
Yeah.
But I didn't know the impact
Hmm.
that it normally would have. And there was not so much information about it either.
No.
You know, there was not like the different guides that Y Combinator, Techstars, they've published like, okay, this is the general rule of when you become a founder, this is this. So there was no rules back then. And I think it was just the trust that the Konfio team had in perhaps my potential, etc., that I could deliver, that they were like, yes, we want to give you X number of stock options, this particular salary, and they even applied for my visa.
Okay.
So I really owe pretty much most, if not a lot of the rest of what of my career has happened to this particular start at Konfio.
I mean, they really bet on you because to today, like still today, having your startup doing the visa process for you, it's not common at all. Usually
That's
they
correct.
don't want it. So
Correct.
if they're doing it, it's like they really believe in you.
Yeah, yeah. So very, very thankful to the Konfio team, and it wasn't easy because it's also something I struggled with till today. You know, like I've never really specialized in like I can't say that I am the credit specialist.
Yeah.
I am the payment specialist. You know, I do know that I have enough knowledge in all of this for every single type of the fintech vertical, but I wouldn't say that I have 10 years in just one thing.
Yeah.
So when I joined the team, I was initially part of the data science team. And I was like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
I don't know how to program.
You know mathematics.
Exactly.
That
That was pretty much it. But where I found my niche was providing context within the data.
Okay.
Right? One thing you realize is like with a lot of the data scientists or engineers, they can program based on instructions, but cannot interpret the results.
Yeah.
Right? Especially when it's lending, which is so complicated. You know, you have payment dates, you have principal due, principal paid, interest due, interest paid, late fees. How do you calculate that? How do you accrue interest? All of these different calculations that have to be accurate. If there's a negative number in principal due, means that I have to pay the customer money. That cannot be right.
Yeah.
But an engineer or a data scientist, to that person, it's like, that's a number. That's the result that I got from applying this formula. What it does, that's not my problem.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of found my niche initially. And that allowed me to learn the business really well. And just taking, you know, any sort of things I could take off other people's plates. Just being like a SWAT team in that sense.
I mean, employee number 13,
Yeah.
basically it's what's expected for early employees.
Correct.
It's being like a Swiss knife.
Correct. Yeah. Or in more crass words, the shit eater. You know, just eating shit every day, right? So doing that, like I think being my personality, being very curious, it's the best thing ever. Where you get paid to learn.
Yeah.
You know, normally it's the other way around. You have to pay other people to learn from them.
Yeah.
Now this time I got paid to learn SQL from some of the best data scientists Mexico has to offer, what lending is, how fundraising works. You know, sitting in a room where David, the CEO of Konfio, is pitching people. There's no better school than a unicorn founder just, oh, this is why we're the best,
I mean, literally, people will pay
exactly.
to be in that room.
Exactly, right?
People will pay to be in that room.
So to have it the other way around was such a massive opportunity.
Yeah.
And again, it wasn't easy. Hindsight is always, oh man, those were the good old days. Do I want to go back to them? Absolutely not. It was tough times. There were a few months where we didn't know if we were going to get extra funding. There were times where growth was not happening the way we wanted, and suddenly some experiment didn't go so well. Risk suddenly went up. Like, how do we fix that? So there was a lot of failures that essentially accumulated to that one success.
Yeah.
And that's what really kept us going. So I did that like 3.5 years. And then I moved to DiDi.
Just to come back on that.
Yeah.
First of all, what you said, it's really true. Like, people see the success and they think like it was a straight line from beginning to the unicorn statue, let's say. They don't realize all the up and downs and all the near-death experience and everything that could have gone wrong. And it's a lot of hard work and luck, and it's a mix of everything. No, it's very complicated, and usually people don't see that part. Other thing, I think from what I know, so you get into Konfio as a data analyst, kind of, but then you moved as a fundraiser.
Yeah.
And you've been raising a lot of money with or for Konfio.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good point. So when I joined, what I wanted to do was essentially, a lot more things maybe I could be a bit more comfortable around. I mean, you always want to find that sweet spot where it's like something new, but also something where you can just kind of be like, no, I got this, just to kind of continue your confidence. Yeah. Because if every day it's just getting punched in the face with new information, you're just like, I'm never going to be able to make it. So they hired my ex-boss, Carlos Arredondo, who is a genius, essentially to kind of lead the finance team. And he also came from like sales and trading background from Bank of America. And essentially it was like, okay, we're going to create this pipeline. We're going to do this. And that was like when that light bulb moment. And I was like, wow. These are exactly the kind of things I enjoy doing. All the due diligence, making sure that all the presentations, all the documents, coordinating with different teams, working with other finance people whom we're either pitching or reporting either potential or existing investors, right? So that's where that idea behind fundraising really came in. So around that time, Series B, we were about to raise Series B, and it was very tough because that was the hardest due diligence with a more traditional investor. And at the same time, we had not so good numbers.
Okay.
So to kind of use that to tell the story. And, normally when you go through fundraising, even if it's like very like Series B, C, a bit more late stage, whatever, nobody really goes like, why is cell BD67 this number? Unless it's like something really weird or like hard-coded, whatever.
Yeah.
If it's within the trend of numbers, nobody really questions. But these guys really, really took us to town, and they were like, this formula on this sheet, on that, what is happening here? And we were like, okay, we've got to really, really kind of build this together.
Which year was that?
2017.
When they were still doing due diligence.
Yeah, that's true. those were the days.
In 2021, I think no one would have asked.
Like, here's the money.
Yeah. But actually, also, like to rebound on that, 2017, I mean, that's not an easy test, raising a Series B in Mexico at that time, because still today, there is not that many Series B. Like, there is still the Valley of Death, which is from Series A to Series B in Mexico, and we are in 2024. So
Yeah.
in 2017, for sure, raising a Series B was a very complicated task.
Yeah.
And with whom you were talking? Which
So
VC?
this was with IFC.
Okay.
Yeah, so very much more traditional,
Yeah.
much more risk averse. Our existing investors and Konfio Series A was like star studded. Even by today's standards, like QED, Kasek,
Yeah.
Wolof. Back then they were known as Jaguar, Quona, Axion. Like even no matter which timeline you're in, having that as your Series A cap table was like you are the top of the top of the top.
Okay.
You know, so those guys were like, we will follow on. You need to get a lead investor, and IFC was really kind of very very almost there. There's just that due diligence process took very long, and that was the first time we were also trying to raise debt, so simultaneously,
Okay.
none of which I'd done before, and it was my responsibility.
Because for that you're talking with banks, which
Debt VCs
okay,
first.
venture debt.
Venture debt, right?
Okay, venture debt.
Which is like with equity guys, they're very optimistic,
Yeah.
right? Because they want to, yeah, when you become a $10 billion, so it's a bit easier to sell them on the qualitative. With debt VCs, they only care about the interest and the collateral.
Yeah.
So they're very quantitative and very pessimistic. They're always going to look at what is the worst case scenario. So to kind of have both of those processes in parallel, and I think it was like just 2-3 people.
That's crazy, huh?
That were doing all of this, for the first time.
Especially.
So the reason why we were fundraising was because we didn't have funding.
Yeah.
So it was like just that pressure to close, to understand everything, and to kind of make sure that there was as few mistakes as possible. But as you can imagine, every single mistake that we could have possibly made, we made it.
Okay.
And
what kind of mistake people usually do?
so with like debt, right? For example,
Yeah.
the first thing they want to see is this thing called the loan tape. So every single loan, what is the status? How many days past due? Is it on time? How much money do they owe? How much money can you make? You know, just to measure the overall risk as well as the size of your portfolio. What is the potential revenue you can get? And we had like, we couldn't generate it automatically.
Okay.
We had to build all these tables that would reproduce those numbers the way the investors wanted to see it. Not the way we wanted to see it internally or we were seeing it internally, but how investors wanted to see it. So to create that from scratch. And that's where, again, the context came in, where it was like, why do we have 5 loans with negative numbers? How can that be? You know, like, because those eliminating or adjusting our constant formulas to be able to have that clean financial knowledge or financial data, that was something we were just creating for the first time. And that's where all these things started popping up. And we're like, what do we do? What's happening? And
Actually, it was a good exercise because it made you realize some
Correct.
bad stuff were going on.
yeah. And then imagine accidentally sending one of those to
Okay. So deal fell
Oh
apart.
my God. Like, I mean, as you can imagine, every single mistake. But I think that's where the whole team effort comes into play. You know, at the top, the CEO, CFO, the CBO, they're the storytellers. They're the ones who are like, this is just a rounding error, who can qualitatively explain. And where a lot of me and my team came in was to support every single argument that they had for their story, be it competitor analysis, be it the overall market, be it our current situation, with the best, cleanest quantitative numbers. And that resulted in that up and down kind of information flow.
Okay.
So that was very exciting, and thankfully we managed to raise our Series B, then Series C. Series C was led by Vostok. and then raised debt from Victory Park Capital as well as IFC.
Okay, big players.
I mean, again, this was something that was so new for me.
Yeah.
How do you do a capital call? What's a waterfall? Like so many things that I had no idea. And then modeling that, what is a covenant? I had no idea, right? So learning all of that on the fly. And it
Yeah.
was just me, the CEO and the CFO at the time. We were just staring at a screen like, what does this mean? I don't know. Then I was on the other laptop Googling. He was like, okay, next. What does this mean? Okay, I don't know. Google
I mean,
it.
covenants are so tricky. Covenants are so tricky. I worked as a
Exactly.
credit analyst, and covenants are very tricky.
Exactly.
You need to really understand them because it can be a big pain in the ass in the future.
Like covenant within a covenant.
Yeah.
You know, those kind of things. We were like, how are we ever gonna? And thankfully, it managed. And after I left, you know, VPC even upsized. They really enjoyed working with us and the works. So this is when banks started sniffing. We're like, how are these digital players who we do not care about?
Yeah.
We don't. They're like tiny ants, and we're like the juggernauts. Suddenly they were coming sniffing around like, what are they doing that is so much better than what we can do? And then they wanted to study what we were doing so well. Why were there all these A loans? Why were they going to us and not them?
Okay.
Because these guys would have no problem getting a loan from a bank, but they're choosing a digital player instead.
And why is that?
Convenience, better rate. Like the promise of technology is my overhead is lower. So my interest rates were lower. You can apply everything online. You don't have to fill in paperwork, go to the bank branch. Everything is done within 5-10 minutes. And if you're really in an urgent situation, then all you need to do is just expedite by talking to customer experience.
Yeah.
You know, so that whole thing, that whole ecosystem that we've built allowed people to constantly be getting loans and also making payments very easy. So we had like several different payment methods, which was also very new at that time, like using STP, which is so common now.
Yeah.
But back then it was like, what is STP, right? To kind of transfer money via the pay mechanism. So doing all of those things that essentially drew those guys to us instead of going to a bank.
And how was the fintech space and infrastructure in Mexico at that time, from 2017 to
Yeah.
20? When did you left?
So I was at Konfio from end of 2015 till early 2018.
Early 2018. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it was a work in progress, to put it lightly.
Yeah.
It was not good. We had most of it was done in-house, and this was also that constant kind of, you know, the back and forth we would have internally. That, of course, we want to own every single piece of the value chain, you know, because that way we can kick as many people out of the value chain as possible, as few middlemen as possible. The problem is that it takes time, it breaks, and you can't exactly grow with the insane accelerated rate that you have, because what you might have built for a loan book of 10 million pesos may not specifically work for a loan book of 1 billion pesos. So sometimes we were like, no, we need to partner with, and like one of the things I respect a lot about David was like, nope, we have the talent to make this in-house, let's make it in-house.
Okay.
Which ultimately paid off a lot because we had our own infrastructure. We didn't have to rely on some other third party going like, today we're down. Oh no, we have code freeze. Oh no, we can't adapt this for you. You know, so we didn't have to listen to any of that nonsense.
Yeah, but you need to be a long-term thinker.
Correct.
Which is not that common, especially when you live in an environment with a lot of like you don't have resources, you know, like you're always short of capital, of human resources.
Correct.
So you really need to be convinced about like your potential, and you need to think long term.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, certain things you can't get away from. AWS, Azure, it's impossible.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, can you create an in-house Tableau instead of paying thousands of dollars a month? Maybe, possibly, you should. And then eventually, once it gets to a point where you have enough capital, you have the right resources, where it becomes more like a need than a want, then absolutely go ahead and do that. You know, same with acquisition as well. The thing is that lending is very unregulated in Mexico, right? It's your money to give.
Okay.
You don't. Interest rates are limitless.
Yeah.
Right. And on top of that, it's like if it defaults, the customer. There's no like FICO score in the U.S. where the one number, if you default on it, it can genuinely affect your ability to do 15 other things. Yes, we have a credit bureau. Of course, it works, especially for like maybe people like me and you, who constantly manage credit. But if let's say I'm underbanked, I get a loan for a tiny business, it doesn't work out. I'm like, screw this, I'm not paying. You can genuinely get out, and that in that sense, the fraud or the write-offs, the risk in that sense, massively high. So to convince equity investors and debt investors to put money in something that was still relatively new in a market and still relatively high, like default rates, risk rates.
Yeah.
That was very tricky. And because there was no anchor, like, how do I say, there was no, except maybe like Banco Compartamos, which eventually, I mean, it's a bank, right? There was no other fintech player except maybe like Alpha Credit, which doesn't exist anymore, Quesky at the time, which has pivoted. Nobody was really doing this. So whenever an equity investor comes in, they need to have a table. You know, the best case, the bear bull base case. And at the same time, looking at how close you are to either a success, most likely a success case, to kind of be like, okay, we believe they are the Netflix of lending. You know, that sort of pitch.
Yeah, having something to compare.
Exactly. Didn't exist.
Yeah.
So to convince somebody to come in blindly in that sense, it left two things: the team and the possible market opportunity. As we got more and more traction, we had to, despite certain times not being so, you know, like that that nice hockey stick curve, where the growth is this and the risk is this. Nah, it was all over the place, and there were times where we needed money, we didn't have the right to build that story around it. That was a masterclass in how I would say like the C level of Konfio did it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So after going through this high growth startup experience, you leave to go start something new with DiDi.
Correct.
How does it happen, and what's your mission with DiDi?
It was actually a very out of the blue, because at that point in time, ride hailing was exploding in LATAM and especially Mexico, right? There was a lot of hype around it, a lot of money being thrown at people.
Which is Uber
and DiDi,
in DiDi,
essentially.
Because DiDi is not everywhere. Like, for example, in France, they don't know what DiDi is.
That's true.
So it's a Chinese competitor of Uber, which
Correct.
is very active in Latin America, especially
That's correct.
in Mexico.
Yeah, and DiDi essentially made a big splash by buying the Brazilian equivalent of Uber, which was called 99.
Yeah.
So they spent a lot of money, acquired them, and they really came in with very strong intentions to take market share away from Uber, as well as establish themselves as the dominant player, right? So that kind of hype, that sort of how do I say, be it in terms of compensation, be it in terms of future, be it in terms of, the being able to start something from scratch. At that point in time, I was what, maybe 27, 28, around there. I still wanted to accelerate my career like crazy.
Yeah.
So I had this opportunity to build DiDi Pay from scratch, which I had no idea about payments.
Yeah, because
Right?
as you say, like you were a fintech specialist, but not like a specialist in something inside fintech.
Correct. So I knew credit by then.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons as well as like, okay, I've spent about 3.5 years, gotten an education in credit. And one thing I'm very thankful for, also fundraising, maybe pitching is always to each individual personality and whatnot, but like what goes in the back,
Yeah.
like the deck, the due diligence, what are they really looking for versus what they're telling you what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Right? Those kind of things. And payment space at the time was growing like crazy. Like, why is this random company called STP existing? What does Stripe do? Why is it worth so much money? They're just moving money from one place to the other, and their margins are tiny.
Yeah.
We're doing credit where it's so much more lucrative. You have a way much longer lifetime value with the customer. Why is this company worth so much? So I had no idea. And I had the opportunity to kind of have the brand and the balance sheet of DiDi to create something on the payment space.
Okay.
And essentially, I got in. There were just two of us, and then one of the teammates left to join Craig Justo, which is now called Cobalto.
Yeah.
Back then, they were competitors of Konfio. Now they're doing something a bit more, a bit different. But essentially, it was just me, and I was like, what am I supposed to? I don't know anything about this. And my boss used to sit in San Francisco.
Okay.
So I would essentially go to San Francisco once a month just to kind of be like, this is what's happening. And we had like three main tasks to change. So to put this in perspective, right? It's a very easy example. When you go to an OXXO or let's say to a restaurant, and then your bill comes and you pay with a credit card. For some reason, the machine says it's from Banorte or some other random company. When you pay, you get a notification in your banking app that says D local star da 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 da, like the rating of your restaurant, and then number, and then the amount of money. And then when the receipt comes out, it says Banorte. Why are all three, four, and then you paid with a Visa card?
Yeah.
Why is there so many different brands? You would think that, okay, I'm paying with a BBVA Visa card. The receipt should have BBVA and Visa on it. What does Visa do here? Right? Why is there MasterCard advertisements? They're like, for everything else, there's MasterCard. Who cares?
Yeah.
What does MasterCard really do?
Payments so complicated.
So complicated.
So complicated.
There's fraud in that as well.
Yeah.
There is like pre-auth, clearance, the acquirer. Mexico is also, or was, the only one in Latin America that needed an additional step of a clearinghouse, like a PROSA, right? So explaining that to somebody that's not used to hearing that, then suddenly they were like, "What? Well, that just screws up the whole payment flow. We're going to make less money now," because they were not expecting anything to go beyond like the scheme, which in this case Visa, MasterCard, the acquiring bank, and then that's it, right?
Yeah.
But only in Mexico we also had a clearinghouse. Now that is gone. Like MasterCard does its own clearing, Visa as well, if I remember correctly. But understanding that, no idea
Yeah, so complicated.
So essentially what I did was I speed dated every single person trying to get my business. The thing with DiDi is that we had a lot of users.
Yeah.
So anytime I was like, okay, I don't understand this, make me sit with someone that can explain this like as if I'm a 5-year-old child or a golden retriever. Just explain it to me. So then I understood, and our aim was to reduce like our per transaction cost, launch a driver debit card, a rider wallet, and apply or explore the idea of getting a fintech license, because around that time the first fintech legislation had been passed.
The famous fintech law.
That's where I lost all my hair.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard like horror stories.
Oh my
of fintech
god,
law.
bro. Oh my god. But that's when all of that was becoming very sophisticated, and for better or for worse, it was providing some level of like guideline.
Okay.
Right? And then the idea of Sofipos was when I entered DiDi. That's when I heard the idea behind a Sofipo, like what it was, why it has finally become so popular after like about almost like 5-6 years later.
And maybe quickly, what's a Sofipo and
Right. Yeah. So
why it's popular?
very, very good question. So the fintech license in Mexico essentially allows you to hold money. Right? Now imagine you would still need a bank at the back, an acquiring bank at the back. So what you had was one account with the bank, and you as the tech or the client facing, you could segregate that one bank into millions.
Yeah.
That's how a fintech operates.
You can split your account.
Exactly.
For your clients.
For my clients.
Yeah.
Which means that from the bank's perspective, I'm only offering one type of account. If the fintech wants to specialize, like offer some other banking service, whatever, they can't do it because it's only one type of account. A Sofipo, on the other hand, allows each individual to have an account, because essentially it's like a bank with 10% of the power and 10% of the regulation, which works perfectly for fintechs, because the job of a fintech is to unbundle all the bank services and provide a niche in one or two services.
Yeah.
So for like the new banks, the Revoluts, the Stories, now DiDi, Sofipo was perfect, because essentially allowed them to have lesser regulation overhead and customize every single account. That's why they can provide all these savings now. Fintechs are legally can get the savings, but they cannot share that with their end customer.
Okay.
They need to contract somebody else outside to provide that savings account.
Okay.
So that's essentially the difference. And where I felt that my, not so much expertise, but like my personality came in with the DiDi project was that at the time Rappi was also launching its Rappi card, and everybody would come up to us like, guys, what are we doing? This looks so sexy, it looks so cool. Look at that pink card. Everything is free. You know, they're throwing money at me for doing nothing. And I was like,
it was the peak of Rappi at the
exactly,
time.
exactly.
You will not want to compete with Rappi.
Exactly. But we were like, okay, just give us a second. Don't worry, we'll make it happen. And our sort of biggest client in that sense for the DiDi card were our drivers, because a lot of them didn't have a bank account. So it was their uncle's bank account, who would one day just wake up and be like, yeah, you know what, screw you, take all the money and leave. Second thing was also they didn't trust banks. So even if we wanted to partner with a bank, and that was the difference between, you know, somebody like maybe like a banked person, like me and you, versus the underbanked or the unbanked in Mexico, who are essentially like, we hate banks because of all the different crises they've put us through. We do not trust them. For us, a bank sponsoring means that I know it'll be safe. They may fleece a lot of commissions and whatnot,
Yeah.
but I know at the end of the day, it's safe. So I realized that our drivers did not want us to work with any of the banks. Even if it's Azteca, and Banco Azteca is famous in Mexico for being like the working man's bank, right?
Which is counterintuitive. Like
Correct.
many people come to Mexico being, wow, there is so much opportunities, there is this fintech opportunity, let's go for it. But they don't take the time to learn the
Correct.
reality. And they're like, yeah, I don't know, I'm from France, let's say. If I want to offer my service to a French customer, it's better to say, hey, look, we work with this bank, with
Yeah.
BNP.
Yeah.
So that makes them more confident in taking the service.
Correct.
And then you come here, and if you don't do your
Due
customer
diligence,
research,
yeah,
your due
yeah.
diligence, you're like, hey, look, we work with Santander. And
Yeah.
then people don't want your product.
Correct.
And you're like, what's wrong with them?
Correct.
So yeah.
That was a huge, like, another light bulb moment,
Yeah.
because I was like, how can it be that anytime I talk to and I don't know how to drive, so I took DiDi's and Uber all the time,
Yeah.
which became like an interview process, you know, where
Every day.
exactly. So I would ask them like, why are you not interested? And they're like, yeah, banks are thieves and just, you know, all of that stuff. So I was like, okay, I'm going to learn everything from banks and how they operate and find a partner that can do it for half or if not zero the cost, and somebody that does not put their logo on it. It's just the DiDi logo. The drivers were very proud to be working for DiDi and Uber. They were like, I'm an Uber driver, I'm a DiDi driver. Like, it was a matter of pride. They did not want some BS bank on top of that either.
Yeah.
So essentially, I had a budget of zero
Nice.
to make this happen. And while Uber Money at the time had like a whole team of engineers, but they were making the classic mistakes. They were like, we're going to have this flashy, sexy card, as if they were pitching us, not the driver. The drivers did not care if the card looked like somebody had vomited on it.
Yeah.
As long as it worked, as long as it did what they wanted it to do, and it provided like almost idiot-proof user experience. So we had like a very basic app, but we had all the bills. They could see all their saldo, the amount that they were supposed to be earning every 8 hours, because they would be paid once a week, and for somebody living paycheck to paycheck or daily, it's a long time.
Yeah.
So instead of being real time, because in the US, like Lyft had done this thing where you could pay like $1 and then press a button and you get instant access. And we're like, who cares?
Yeah.
Let's do it for free every 8 hours. Worked like magic. Another problem that they had was for them to withdraw money, they had to, if let's say we did work with a bank, say we worked with Santander, where they live, there's no Santander ATMs.
Exactly.
So if they have to withdraw money, they have to pay their own money to withdraw their own money.
Yeah.
That makes no sense. So we created this thing where they could go to any ATM in the whole of Mexico. They would pay up front, but we would reimburse
Okay.
for up to 4 withdrawals per month, which they were like, yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
And one other thing we realized is that the driver barely used the card. It was the wife
Okay.
who needed to use for groceries, paying stuff. So she ran the house. The driver just needed some cash so you could buy coffee, whatever. So for him, it was like, I'm out there earning, I'm out there driving, however many hours, you take the card, you do whatever you need to do with it. So then that another sort of thing clicked. We need to cater to the wives of the driver, not the driver. The driver just wants to make sure that when he opens the app, he can track the transactions. He knows his sueldo, and it comes to him directly. And then his wife checks him, hey, by the way, the water bill is here. Okay, click, click, done.
Man, that's so interesting. Like, it's so interesting because it's so true, like it's so real, but you really need to live it and to
Correct.
understand it.
Correct. So then we beat Uber to market. We exploded onto the scene. Everybody loved it. And we, instead of paying for integration, we essentially had a 50-50 split where every peso that came to DiDi, half of it went to the fintech provider that we had, and half of it came to us. So this way, he was able to start covering his costs for doing all the upfront integration, and at the same time, we didn't have to pay anything upfront. We were revenue sharing.
Okay.
So that allowed me to kind of pitch this relatively small player instead of going with a reliable bank kind of, and the banks were so expensive, integration would take forever.
Yeah.
Here we had all the autonomy. I could get up on the phone and be like, no, I need this specific thing. Give me 3 days, done.
Okay.
So it was a very good way to launch and started growing. Now with people like Story, Nubank, it's so easy for the drivers to get their own bank accounts and whatnot that are not by the banks.
Yeah.
That they're like, these guys are giving me all these savings, all that, this, that, whatever. So there was almost that kind of war for the driver. And then eventually, now that DiDi has its own sort of like Sofipo,
Yeah.
I think there's going to be that kind of tussle again for the wallet share of the driver or the rider, because they're also giving cards to the riders now.
Which is good. Competition is good, and it used to be people that bank were not fighting at all to get them.
Correct, exactly.
So that's why they were underbanked, because bank were like, no, we don't want them. Like even if they come, we don't want them.
Yeah.
And now, so they're at the center of this competition where banks and fintechs, especially fintechs, are really like trying to offer the best product and experience to this segment of the population.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
that's real
I love
financial
that.
inclusion. Yeah, that's very, very good. And so someday you have this crazy idea of becoming a founder yourself.
Yeah, I think I have like a lot.
And I will quote you. I have it here. Doing a startup is the worst, best decision of my life.
Oh my God, yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Right. So I categorize all my decisions in 4 buckets. Right. My best, my worst, my worst, best, and my best, worst decision.
Okay.
Right. So best. I'm guessing it'll still evolve and whatnot. Worst, I hope it doesn't evolve more.
Yeah. Finger crossed.
Fingers crossed. But if I look at my worst, best decision amongst all the best decisions I've ever made, this is right at the bottom.
Okay.
Why did I think that? Because on one hand, you learn so much. How do you start a company? How do you make a cap table?
Yeah.
How much do you pay somebody? Do you outsource things in the beginning, or do you try and build a team? Who do you hire? How do you hire? How do you come up with a name?
Yeah.
How do you do a trademark? Like basic stuff. How do you do a website?
But basic stuff of everything.
Of
That's
everything.
always what I say. It's like, if you take every task individually,
Yeah.
it's not that hard.
Yeah.
But the problem is like you have to do all these tasks in so many areas at the same time.
Correct.
And
Correct.
most of them you need to do accounting, HR, marketing, sales, tech, you name it, and you have to do it. And that's why early stage is so hard. Because it's so broad, the knowledge and everything at the same time. And you just have 24 hours in a day.
Correct. It's very exciting, but it's exhausting. And one of the things is that every day you're just getting punched in the face by reality. Just failure after failure. And you still got to wake up every morning, but like, I'm still going to make it happen. Still going to make it happen. And the thing is that it's what I found, at least in my experience, was that it was the people. And one of the reasons why I also call it, the worst best decision in that sense is, during that time, a lot of personal things in my life were also happening.
Okay.
I lost my relationship for the person that I came to Mexico for,
Okay.
right? Hadn't seen my family in so long. You can't really get up and take a vacation.
No.
No, and especially going around the world, after not seeing your family for a while, you're like, what do I do? In that sense, you feel kind of boxed in. And going through like a relatively tough breakup, and how do I say, you not only lose the person, you lose the family,
Yeah.
especially in a Mexican relationship.
Yeah.
Right? So that was very tough. And at the same time, we were still trying to raise money. We're still trying to do this, that, and you're living on reduced salaries. There's so much pressure to succeed, just 1% a day. So that part sucked. But the best thing to come out of it was that the people who were around me during that time are like, you can never lose them.
Yeah.
So finding those gems of people whom maybe I was not even so close with before, but they were there.
Yeah.
You always hear stories about co-founders having a very bad fallout and whatnot. We're family. Like when I had nowhere to go for Christmas,
Yeah.
it was his family that took me in.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it was like those kind of relationships which can only happen through that kind of adversity, is why this is like the worst, best decision. When you're in this sort of club almost, you've been a founder before too.
Yeah.
Whether you succeed or fail, suddenly people who are in this particular club will be a lot nicer, right? They will genuinely give you good advice.
Yeah.
They're always willing to introduce you to someone. No need for like a kickback. There's no like for a commission. Nothing.
No.
You're just there, and they're like, don't worry about it, because they've been through that. So those kind of things really helped a lot. And what was my startup about? Given how I mentioned how I grew up, it was a very standard middle class and whatnot. And the whole time I had no idea what business was, what investing was. Growing up, my parents, they had no idea what investing was as well. They thought it was gambling. And once I started working on the trading floor, be it doing like bonds or FX or derivatives, whatever, it gave me a very good idea as to how this world actually works. So helping them save money. I'm not saying like, yeah, let me open up my own trading station at home and I'm going to be, no, like investing.
Yeah.
That for me was such a big thing because the amount of opportunity cost, like if my parents had just come to Singapore and put like $500 every single month in the S&P 500, the top 500 companies in in the US,
Yeah.
they would not have to worry about money. But because they didn't do that, it was like saving under a mattress or hoping that a savings account in a bank is going to give them return,
Yeah.
which never going to happen. Or falling for like, yeah, give me your money and I'll give you guaranteed 50%. That kind of stupid shit. That I've experienced with so many people. So I was like, I want to do something about that. And with my own savings, I came across this app in Singapore called Stashaway, where one thing you also realize with finance apps is like this graph, that indicator, this so much. It's like sensory overload.
Yeah.
You want something that's idiot proof, where you press the button, it does exactly what you want it to do. Simple. No like 15 advertisements for this, that. this is what's happening in the market. You don't care.
Yeah, because you're not a trader.
Exactly.
You just invest your money. That's it.
Exactly. Somebody like once a month
Yeah.
that sends you an email explaining what happened as if you're trying to explain this to a 5-year-old child. You know, that is exactly what I was looking for. And I realized very quickly as well is that people really suffer saving in pesos and they want to save in dollars. So how could I possibly find a way to create an app that allowed people to send me a SPAY, a bank transfer in Mexico in pesos? I would dollarize it for the cheapest rate possible for them and invest it in the US in dollars. And instead of like a Robinhood or a trading app like GBM Plus, where it's a platform you enter and like good luck. If you lose, win, that's on you.
Yeah.
I wanted to guide people through it. Like somebody like within my family, you know, that has no financial background. But you click here, click there, like, that's what it means. I have X amount of money in gold. I didn't even know that. What does gold mean? Simple explanation. What is S&P 500? A bunch of finance people I know don't know what S&P 500 is.
Yeah.
Right? So a clear explanation on every single thing. And every single transaction listed for you so that you know when we took our fees. You know when you got a dividend. Most people don't even know that dividends exist. Like,
Yeah.
why am I getting free money? No. You got it. Nothing is free. But at the same time, this is the kind of stuff that happens when you're part of the shareholder class or the investor class instead of putting your money in a bank.
Yeah.
So that was the vision, you know, and for better or for worse, we did it in the worst possible timing when inflation started going up like crazy.
When did you launch?
So we launched, I became full-time on it October 2021.
Okay.
There was still a bunch of free money going around back then.
Yeah.
So we were able to raise like $1 million pretty easily from very good investors as well. And we launched around like August, September of 2022.
Okay, so yeah, it's getting bad.
That by then, every VC had sort of closed shop, especially towards LATAM.
Yeah.
Because interest rates were rising.
Yeah, in June, more or less, I remember very well.
Exactly.
In June of that year, it was like, okay,
Correct.
we are on hold because we don't know what's gonna happen.
Exactly. That whole, it was almost overnight even.
Yeah.
You know, and the stock market just started plummeting like crazy. And me and my co-founder were both ex-finance guys. And we're like, this is the best time because if we can convince people like buy now, within a couple of years when things turn around, which they have, their portfolios would be flushed. But market sentiment, or when you're speaking to people, you genuinely start realizing that panic is something you cannot quantify. You cannot reason with panic.
Yeah.
You know, so people were selling. People were like, no, I don't want to. The market, this guy told me, fucking Jim Cramer.
Fucking Jim Cramer.
Came in.
Do all the opposite.
Just always the opposite.
And you know,
exactly.
there's a strategy. Actually, there's a real strategy of people betting against Jim Cramer.
Exactly.
That's crazy. Because the guy is so wrong all the time.
I bet he does that too.
Yeah, probably. It's like what I'm thinking right now. Okay,
Exactly.
I will get the other one.
And at that time, because of all the sort of easy monetary policy, inflation in the US started rising, and Mexico did not have as much of that stimulus.
Yeah.
So the peso started appreciating against the dollar. Like at some point, it was like 16.
Yeah.
So
bad memories for digital nomads.
exactly, all the digital nomads was be like, oh my god. And the thing is that that's it. Like it was a double whammy because inflation was rising, so cost of things was improving, while peso was getting stronger. So suddenly everything became like, why is the rent of this 1-bedroom apartment in Roma, 35,000 pesos. What just happened?
Yeah.
Those kind of things started changing a lot. So, from my product perspective, selling individuals, because we started as B2C,
Yeah.
right? A lot like Fintual, who have a lot of respect for what they're doing. Essentially, people would come and be like, bro, why you want, our thesis was, let me put your money in stocks, which were doing terribly, and in dollars, which was doing terribly.
Yeah.
And they were like, why should I do that? Look at this, peso's gonna be forever, and like, all these fanboys. And I was
Yeah.
like, trust me, this is a tiny, in the overall trend of how peso has been, this is a tiny blip, and I will be proven right. This is the best time for you to get in.
And no, it's 2024, and you were right.
I mean,
say to them, I told you.
I told you so. And the thing is that if we had still survived,
Yeah.
if we hadn't run out of cash, I would say like almost mid of Q2 of this year, if we had managed to raise $500,000, our customers, first of all, would have been very happy. And at some point in time, necessity is the mother of all innovation, right? We saw that the B2C market was just not moving.
Yeah.
No matter how many people we spoke with, etc., people always have their own beliefs, which even if you can convince them with facts, won't change their minds.
Yeah, and there is something very true. Is like everyone think they are smarter than the market. Everyone. So it doesn't matter how much they know about stocks or about economy or about
Correct.
whatever.
Yeah.
Everyone think they are smarter
Correct.
than the market.
Correct. And then suddenly when it goes the other way around, then there's panic selling, right? So we wanted to stop that from happening. So we didn't even allow real-time movement of your profit and loss.
Okay.
It was just refreshed once a day. Go live your life.
Yeah.
Let us handle all of these things for you. And towards like the middle, we started changing the branding of how we approach. Like, we're not an investing app, that sort of boring, tough kind of numbers investing when you think about it. We're more like a lifestyle app where let me help you reach your financial goals. Don't think about me as a way of like something you have to do, something you want to do. Because people are not investing because they're like, oh, I want to become like Benjamin Graham, intelligent investor, whatever. Maybe some people.
Yeah.
But most people are like, I want to buy a car.
Yeah.
If I save this much right now, how long will it take with me putting my money with Midas to get there?
Yeah.
That's how we started branding. And that's when we also realized that a lot of fintech companies, or that whole idea about rendimiento garantizado, like the new bank, 15% annual guaranteed, whatever. That became a huge thing, which was a double-edged sword. On one hand, people were saving, which was fantastic for us. On the other hand, they always wanted guaranteed returns.
So many people in Mexico started to save thanks to Nubank.
Correct.
So many people. That's crazy.
Within 3 months, they gained about 1 billion pesos in assets under management just because of that.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Masterclass. And I was very happy because this was going to be that thing that leads to people eventually going like, hey, you know what? Now I'm comfortable with this level. I want to explore this level. That's where we would kind of help them.
Yeah.
But also a lot of companies wanted to copy the Nubank model. So we weaponized our technology to become a white label solution.
Okay.
Which was very, very, very popular because people were like, I can connect with you guys and I don't have to build my own team. I don't have to get the license. I don't have to learn what the hell portfolio management is. I can outsource all of this and we revenue share on top of that.
Yeah.
So I get a free vertical. I pay maybe some money upfront for integration. And then eventually I get get to retain customers, and I get to acquire customers that I never had before.
Yeah.
So that was very popular. The thing is that at that time we were already starting to kind of get towards that point of no return within the startup. This was the third year that we were almost reaching 3 years of the
Okay.
startup with just $1.5 million raised. And we were in a very regulated industry. And the license itself supposed to take 3 months, but to get the digital approval for onboarding people on the app digitally instead of signing a paper contract, supposed to take 3 months, took 2 years.
Yeah.
That was brutal.
Yeah, I remember the first time I met you.
Yeah.
You told me I wanted to be a fintech founder to do product. I spend all my day doing compliance.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is not the fun part at
Exactly.
all. Like marketing can be fun, product can be fun, everything can be fun, but compliance, no.
Nobody wants to stay up all night.
No offense for people who love compliance.
You guys are the real heroes.
Yeah.
Really. I would sell my kidney to do what you guys are doing,
yeah.
really. But it's tough to kind of go through pages upon pages of legalese.
Yeah.
And this is where I'm very grateful to have my co-founder who, was an ex-investment banker. So he really understood like the legal and the finance aspect of it. So that was super helpful in moving us forward. So two things happened. Very popular. We had like a huge pipeline of clients and we were like, let's go out there, let's hunt for more money. But the goalposts had changed. Before, it was like, oh, you have an amazing pipeline. You're still at like the pre-seed stage. Fuck it, let's make it happen.
Yeah.
Here's 100, 200K. Let's try it out. And our burn was so low, like 25K a month, right? So 200K would have been like about 10 months, 8 months of additional runway, right? And then subsequently, the goalpost moved after that June, July 2022,
Yeah.
right? Now it wasn't just enough to have a pipeline. You needed the signed LOI. Okay, we got it. Then the goalpost moved again. We don't want just the LOI, get me traction.
Yeah.
And that's where the big problem came in, where business cycles were insanely long. Where we could have been smarter was that, okay, if by the third month you haven't gone live, you pay me a minimum monthly, so at least we can subsidize our costs and make back some of the money that we lost integrating with you.
Okay.
And this was one of the advice that I got from, there's another founder in Singapore who used to have investing as a service company. And he was like, just because there's a big name coming towards you does not translate to a lot of sales or revenue. They could be just using you to learn your technology.
Yeah.
They sign the contract, yeah, NDA, all that stuff. What you need as a founder is users. And you're hoping or expecting that a big name will translate to a lot of users. Not always true.
Okay.
Especially with the B2B side of things. So that's where we kind of had that sort of conundrum where we were like, look, we're not going to be able to survive this business cycle of launching with XYZ clients. The B2C, we would need to pump in money to genuinely see this upward trend. And by then, also, like, things were already starting to move a little. Early
it was
2024.
last year?
Early 2024.
This was this year. Okay.
Things were already starting to move in the market. Our existing clients were like, holy shit, why am I making so much money? Like, they were actually like, is everything fine? I cannot believe I'm making so much money. We're like, you trusted the right people.
Yeah.
You're on the right path, and this is exactly the kind of value that we provide. My cleaning lady, actually, VIP customer, shout out. She could not believe that she would just put in like $20 a couple of weeks, very tiny amounts, but the percentage return, she'd almost gotten 50% increase in her portfolio.
That's Crazy, like so good.
So we were like, look, this demonstrated, this works, etc., etc. And the thing with fundraising or just pitching in general, you always have to come across as a FOMO. You know, you can never come across like, shit, we only have 2 more months. It's do or die for us.
Yeah.
What do we do? And people can sense it. People can smell it. And that's when closing a deal becomes so difficult. And that's when we kind of came to that conclusion that, you know what, hey, I think it's time we find a way to square things properly. We have a lot of respect for our investors who took a chance on us. I always tell my team this quote from The Office. What's the difference between a boss and a baby? Eventually, the baby grows up, right? All bosses do is just demand, whine, and moan. So I have a lot of respect for my team as well for carrying me and my co-founder to go on this insane journey with us, and to be able to wrap things up properly, help my team with whatever, and be able to kind of start a new chapter. That's been also almost a success in its own way. You never want to close a company and people are like trying to find you.
Yeah, exactly.
Or move to a different country with a new name. You never want that kind of episode to happen. So essentially, it's been a blessing in disguise, and I also felt like I'm a lot more relaxed now. Being a founder is attracts a certain personality type.
Yeah.
In that sense. And would I do it again? Absolutely not.
Yeah. Really not. It was nice.
It was a great journey.
Yeah.
I'm not discouraging other people from doing it,
It's
but
gonna be a great story when I'm a grandfather telling my grandkids.
Exactly.
You know what I did when I was younger in Mexico?
Exactly. It would be a great tale to tell my grandkids or whatever.
Yeah.
But I doubt I will. I'm already 35. The next startup I want to be working on is my kids. You know what I mean? Think about spending my energy on those kind of my hobbies, my relationships, expanding how much I enjoy cooking, for example, having time for it, and seeing what else the world has to offer.
But it's very good that you shared that failure, because to the day I still heard young founder who are like, oh no, raising money is so easy, because they grew up as an entrepreneur in 2021, and they still think like, why don't we raise money? It's so easy. I mean, you had an amazing background. You had the experience raising money with a unicorn, so you know what to do. You already know what to do. You had a great product, and still you didn't succeed in raising.
Yeah.
Because it's so hard. People don't realize it's so hard. Like,
Correct.
You need to go through to get it, to understand it. It's so hard, and like, I really want like every founder to realize like it's not that easy to raise money. There's maybe a few exceptions in the world who can raise money easily, but most of the people, like normal people, it's so hard.
Absolutely.
To finish, I have a few questions.
Yeah, sure.
So I just don't want to close it without asking you. What a misconception people might have about the fintech opportunity in Mexico? Because when you talk about Mexico and startup, it's always, the fintech opportunity. What can be a misconception about it?
Yeah, so the headline is always that 50% of Mexico is unbanked.
Yeah.
What an amazing opportunity. We can go out there, change their minds, and look at, like, it's 150 million people. 75 million of them do not have a bank account. Wow. You don't have this kind of white space anywhere else. That is not true. Out of those 50%, 80% of those guys don't want to be banked.
Exactly.
They don't want to be on the tax system. They don't want the government to know what their activities are. So the way to capture that white space is more, how can I use digital means to move or facilitate the cash movement? Because they're not going to go away from cash. But if I can find a way for them to, like for example, what Spin by Oxo, if I want to lend money to somebody that's unbanked, great. It's fine if you don't have a bank account. Go to this Oxo, scan this barcode, you get money, and then in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, you go back, you pay me in cash, you say the reference number, and voila, I have your money back.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in giving you a bank account. I know you don't want to be banked. Let me facilitate your cash movement instead. That's the right way to approach this. What's the other one? Lending is easy. That's my favorite. Every other fintech bank is like, let me show you my 5-year plan. We're going to start with getting, savings account, unit economics negative because you barely make money from it. Then we're going to have lending. Look at this insane margin. So easy. We're just going to add lending. As if it's like a plug and play on a Lego piece.
Yeah.
It's not. It's the hardest thing you'll do. And it's a lot easier to have a savings account. Even though it's your money to give, you're going to lose a lot of it if you don't have the proper controls in place. The risk, the customer service, the constant monitoring. If you cannot do that, you'll be like, yeah, I just started lending, and out of 1,000 people, maybe five of them will pay you back. That kind of, it's not easy. And then what's the third one? Maybe this is more about my personal experience, that investing apps are not going to make it. Because when we started the Robinhood wave, everybody was like, oh my God, I'm doing the Robinhood of this. So it helped us raise money. But as soon as those kind of apps started having their kind of downturn, I mean, right now it's still stable, etc. There is a massive opportunity for investing apps in Mexico. It just needs a bit of kind of that the, how do I say, the snowball effect to get people to really start getting into how do I organize my finances. And thankfully, there's a lot of apps doing that.
Okay.
So I know that maybe we were at the wrong place at the wrong time, but one day, one way or the other, there will be some app that's going to be killing it in Mexico.
Timing to market is so important.
Yes.
If you're too early, it doesn't
Correct.
work.
Exactly.
Additional question. What do you think about buy now, pay later, especially in Mexico and Latin America?
Very good question. Maybe not so much the rest of Latin, because I know different countries have their own bespoke rules, bespoke regulations and target segments for this. But within Mexico, I'm surprised how successful it is. Because if you have a credit card, people live on meses sin intereses here.
Yeah.
People go to Starbucks and pay it with monthly without interest. They get a coffee that they can pay over a period of 6 months. So that's very common here. But I think the difference, which is becoming very interesting, is that certain items which before you as a retail store would not want people to pay over months.
Yeah.
Because of just the risk associated with it. With BNPL players like Aplazo and even enablers like Nelo, both of them doing ridiculously well. They're essentially reducing the overall risk of default by having that kind of channel of measuring the risk of their customers, providing the final retailer the thing that, don't worry, I'll handle it. With banks, it's more like my way or the highway. This guy defaults, I gave him the opportunity, but if he screws up, that's on you. Because it's a bank, they have the bargaining power.
Yeah.
So now, kind of being that bridge, I think that's super interesting. It's something that Amazon is also trying to do, or wants to do, or might do. And they're trying to target even sort of like the lower economic pyramid who maybe never have experienced this before. It's dangerous, for sure.
Yeah.
You don't want to be in that trap where it's like, yeah, no, it's fine. I do want that 85-inch TV that I'm going to spend the next 17 years paying, because if there's something that can go wrong and it will go wrong, these are the kind of things that will come and bite you in the ass.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very good way to offer more products and services that perhaps were not available before. But I think there has to be that level of education, or at least that, restriction almost, where as the person offering this service, you have to be a bit more stringent on who you're offering this to. Because as soon as people kind of go like, oh yeah, now I can afford a car, then I'm going to spend the next 50 years paying, they will do it.
Yeah.
Without seeing the obvious flaw in the policy of how long they'll have to, the trap that they're going to be stuck in. Very interesting question.
Okay. We'll see what happens.
Exactly. Still very early.
Still very early. In your opinion, the Mexican market is more similar to the US market or to the Indian market?
Indian market, absolutely. I would say like tech adoption wise, Mexico is maybe about 5 years behind India.
Yeah.
Like there you'll see like people, even like the shoe shiner, the guys who are the mom and pop store, those guys are like super tech savvy. I just came back from Delhi and I was surprised that even like my tuk-tuk driver, I was like, I only have cash. I don't know. You're like, relax. He has a mobile, like a clip equivalent right there on his, and I was like, damn it. that kind of adoption, you don't see as much yet, but it'll happen.
It will happen.
Another big difference between the US market and Mexican market in that sense, I'd say it's a lot more cultural in terms of the similarity between Mexico and Indian, because it's a bit more conservative. Of course, people are influenced by the US in that sense, like we want to be consumerist. We want to buy things. We want to have like, if I have one car, then I want 2 cars, then I want 3 cars. That sort of thing exists, but it's a lot more conservative in terms of the demand and the appetite, which is very similar to India than the US. And I think a lot of it has to do with how I would say the previous generation was brought up, like, always try and save for a rainy day, be a bit more conservative. Don't spend on things that you don't need.
Yeah.
That sort of mentality still exists. The last thing is education. Both of these countries are massively lagging versus the US.
I have a strong opinion about that, and there is so many obvious bridges between the US and Mexico and Latin America, and so many copycats from US startup or startup from Mexico want to expand into the US, or the US company want to expand into Mexico. So common. I'm convinced there is a huge untapped opportunity between Southeast Asia, including Asia, India, and Mexico and Latin America, because these markets are way more similar. So a successful startup from Southeast Asia should come to Latin America, and a successful startup from South America or Latin America, including Mexico, should go or at least research about Southeast Asia. So many opportunities to explore.
You're absolutely right. And I mean, I don't want to brag or anything or be the humble brag or whatever, right? I think I've been in that privileged position where coming from Singapore, having looked at the Asian market, and then having worked in the Mexican market, kind of that perspective has been very interesting for me. Where before starting my company, I worked for a Singaporean company called Niem, also a unicorn that does B2B remittances, and essentially finding how they approach LATAM as an Asian company and being at the center of it. That was super interesting, and that's why it's something that's always kind of swirling in my head, that there's so many opportunities where maybe Mexico is behind Southeast Asia in 1, 2, 3 things that I can bring over here, and vice versa.
Yeah.
very, very fascinating topic. Yeah.
We'll talk more about it.
Absolutely.
I think we did everything. So
Amazing, man.
what's the future for the stand-up comedian? Because we almost didn't talk about it. So I want to close the podcast about your career as a stand-up comedian.
How I got into it. So I was always the funny kid in class, you know, getting kicked out for cracking jokes and whatnot. I didn't even know you could do that for a living.
Yeah.
Right? And then I think during like the financial crisis of 2008, where a lot of people got laid off, they were like, let me find some other opportunities. And a bunch of them started comedy clubs in Singapore. So I got dared to do by one of my friends. It was like, hey, you were the funny guy, you should do it. And I was like, hell yes. As if I was born to. And the first time it went really well. The next 10 times, terrible. And the Singaporean crowd can be tough, you know, either not laughing at all or like sarcastic laughs, like the which is the worst. The Mexican crowd is a lot more accepting. They will come over like, and every comedian has bombed on the on the stage before.
Yeah.
You cannot be like, I've always done well. That cannot be. So people in the crowd usually come over, they'll smile at you, be like, hey, no, keep it up. Or buy you a beer, you know, this, that. So in that sense, Mexico has also, just like my fintech career, the parallel with my comedy career has always been like just getting that opportunity to go out there, testing the waters, meeting great people who have managed to kind of bring me to different places. You know, I've also had the chance to perform in New York, San Francisco, LA, Singapore, majority of the clubs in Mexico City. So I really can't complain. And of course, as a founder, it's been tough to kind of consistently do it. So now that one of the bright spots or the silver linings of not having Midas is that I can maybe do a few more jokes. And it all started, actually, what's funny is that I thought I was not really going to do comedy again. I thought I was just going to, you know, lay low. Was during the Mexico Tech Week, one of my ex-investors calls me up and he's like, hey, can you do a roast for
Wow.
for all the VCs and founders, because they also have a very successful podcast, and essentially they bring like, it's almost like that sort of bootstrap versus VC funded. I can't remember the name of the unicornios.
Indie unicornios.
Indie versus unicornios, exactly. Yeah. So they essentially were like, we have 10 additional minutes. Nobody knew I was going to do stand-up. There's a room full of people, like all very serious and like trying to, you know, write down notes and get ideas. And I was like, hey, let me do something. And I just went off. Like all that 3 years of pent up, just, you know, just started roasting every single type of VC, every single type of founder, myself. You know, just like the stupid shit that I did as a founder. And it was very cathartic. And I was like, oh man, I want to do this more. And met a few people who introduced me to a few other comedians, and, you know, trying to do more comedy now at different places.
And amazing. Looking forward for your new show.
Thank you so much.
I will love it for sure. Man, it was a pleasure to have you in the podcast. It was a very, very good conversation. I learned so much. You have a great experience, and I wish you the best for the next few years.
Really, really appreciate it. And the pleasure is all mine. And you know, always happy to come back whenever you want me to.
Will do.